and welcome to our English First Additional Language Lessons by Miss T.L.L. and a very warm welcome again to the 2024 academic year. In this lesson, we are going to look in depth on the nature of tenses and what we actually mean by the word tense. Why is it important in English to know tense and different types of tenses? Remember that critical language awareness refers to the knowledge that language cuts across all the components rather, or all the four skills set in caps. Whether you are writing, there's critical language awareness when writing, there's critical language awareness when you're doing visual literacy, when you are writing a summary, when you are reading a novel, when you're reading poetry, there's always critical language awareness. But what's also important to note is that the knowledge of tenses will come in very handy when you have to tackle different writing pieces, as well as dealing with questions around language structure and conventions in paper 1, question 5. You should expect questions around the tenses and changing of tenses. For example, in question 5, normally you'll be given a sentence where examiners will ask you to change that particular sentence from one tense to the other. But what is also important is understanding the tenses in such a way that it will aid you when you now have to write various transactional pieces, so that you know how to detail the events that transpire depending on time, because tense actually represents nothing but time. The definition here, it says the word tense is derived from a Latin word tempus, which means what? Time. So it means that we are studying nothing but time. It means that a tense will answer the when part, and then we rely on a verb to know the tense. The verb will indicate the tense and the time. Remember, in the parts of speech, you must also know parts of speech. If you are not sure about your parts of speech, I would advise that you check my 2 previous videos that I did on parts of speech. I did unpack the parts of speech. So when you look into a verb, which is an action word, the action word will determine or tell you when did the action happen, and then ultimately that gives us what? It gives us what? Tense. And then to say that a verb indicates the time of an action, event, or condition by changing its form. So we are going to learn different types of tenses by changing the form of the form of a verb, because a verb is actually key in understanding tenses. And then tenses, ultimately, what do? They indicate the time in which action, event, or condition took place in a particular sentence. And then based on time frame, the verb tenses may be categorized according to time frame. And then we can have what you call a present tense. We can also have what you call a past tense. We can also have a future tense. So present tense meaning that action is taking place currently, and then past tense, it means an event that happened in the past, and then future tense, it means that something that will happen in the nearby future. So we are for you to thoroughly understand tenses, just know that they are time orientated, in a sense that the verb will indicate as to which time frame did the action take place. And then from these basic three that we know, I'm going to break them now into 12 types of tenses, so that we understand them in depth. Right, and then let us look closely into the definition so that we thoroughly understand how to define the concepts, so that now when we get into unpacking tenses in as far as playing around with words, action words, we know the key definitions of different types of tenses. Now with the present tense expresses an unchanging, right? Unchanging or repeated or reoccurring action or situation that exists only now. It can also represent a widespread truth. So when we want to talk about things that are happening presently, or things that are repeated, for example, I go to school daily. It's an activity that I repeat daily. So I'll write about it in a present tense because it's an action that is repeated or reoccurring. Action or situation that exists only now. For an example, I prefer to eat. I prefer, the word prefer there. I prefer to eat now. It means that it's something that is happening now at the moment. It can also represent a widespread truth. What do we mean by widespread truth? In other words, we can say, change the expression to say it's a universal truth. For an example, if you say the earth orbits around the sun, that is a fact that will never change. We cannot say the earth orbited around the sun. That means now we are changing the universal truth to be something else. So factual information such as universal truth will always remain in a present tense. So whenever we have to know that the statement is in a present tense, it means that you look into the tense, and then it must express something that is unchanging, or something that is repeated, or something that is reoccurring, action or situation that exists only now. It can also represent a widespread truth. Remember, widespread truth can also be known as universal truth or universal facts. They are normally written in a present tense because that is a fact that cannot be changed into a past tense. Now, let us look into a past tense. A past tense expresses an action or situation that was started and finished in the past. So with a past tense is something that occurred in the past, or it might have been repeated. Remember, I'm yet to break all these three key tenses that we know into a simple past tense, a present, past progressive tense, and so forth. But firstly, we need to understand them as the key foundations or key components of tenses before we can delve deeper into other forms of verbs. So a past tense will indicate an action that happened. Remember, we said tenses are time orientated, right? Tenses are there to indicate the time in which or the period where in which action took place. Basically, tenses are there to answer the when part. And then future tense, it means future tense expresses an action or situation that will occur in the future. Now, having this as our frame, as our skeleton, as our foundation, now we are going to break them now to understand them deeper by breaking them into other forms of tenses that can be formed by changing the form of verb to indicate different times in which action takes place. Correct. And sometimes the tenses can be based on aspect. Verb tenses may also be categorized according to the to aspect. Aspect refers to the nature. It refers to the nature of the action described by the verb. There are four aspects. For example, we can have what you call indefinite or simple tenses. What we mean by that is that indefinite describes action without specifically stating whether the actions are completed or ongoing. For an example, if I can say, I read a book, it's a simple present tense or an indefinite tense, because remember the definition says that it describes action without specifically stating whether the action is completed or ongoing. So if I say I read a book, it's something that I'm doing currently. It's a simple present tense, but we don't know as to whether am I going to continue reading it throughout the day, or am I done reading that particular book. So whenever you see a tense that explains, or a verb rather, a verb that explains or describes action without specifically stating whether the action is completed or ongoing, we call that indefinite or simple a present tense. And then we also have continuous or progressive. With this one is quite easy. I would say we'll have the verb ending with with the suffix ing. Remember, suffix are the last letters of the words that are added into the words to change the meaning of the word, and then prefix are words that are added at the beginning to change the meaning of the word. So if you see the suffix ing, like cooking, eating, walking, you know that the action is actually continuous, it's still continuing. I think now it takes us back to what I've just explained with a simple present tense, that it simply states actions without explicitly stating whether the action is still continuing or it's ongoing. But just state, for example, she eats dinner to daily. We don't know if she's done eating that dinner or what. So that one we call it an indefinite. The word, when you look into the word indefinite alone, it means the word indefinite means that lasting for an unknown or unstated length of time, right? Hence, we say that the simple present tense does not indicate the period in which the action takes place or when will the action end or is the action continuing. We call them simple present tense. Now, the contrast between the two is that with a continuous, we know that now we are certain that this action is progressive or continuous when we see now the verb ending with what? ing. Now let us move to perfect or complete and perfect continuous. Now when you look into the word perfect tenses now, right, we are going to come across the use of the words have or has or had in the past tense. All right. And then have, that's when the subject is in a plural form. For example, they have a lot of money, or in instances when you're talking about the first personal pronoun I, you can't say I has. Of course, that's going to be grammatically incorrect. You are going to say I have, but mostly have will be used if the subject is in a plural form. The only condition that qualifies the word have to be used when a subject is in a singular form is when we couple it with the use of a personal pronoun I to say I have won. For example, I have won. They have a lot of money, for example. Sorry, it's supposed to be they. So of course has will be used in instances where now the subject is in a singular form, and then this had will be the past tense of have and has. But then let us look closely into perfect tenses. What do we mean by perfect tenses? So in the perfect tenses will refer to actions that are already done when speaking about them, right? Remember, I already made you guys aware that that's when you are going to use have and has. And then the rule or grammatical rules that in order to form the present perfect tense, we use the word have or has followed by the past particle of the verb. For regular verbs, the past particle is a form of the verb that ends with ed. For example, the past particle of cook is cooked, so it will be they have cooked, changing it into a past tense. Now let us look into this example. They had gone to the movies. When they had, right, had, which makes it a perfect tense, and then in this case past perfect tense, gone to the movies. So in this case it means that the word gone refers to the fact that they already went to the movies in the past, okay, and the action is already completed whilst we are speaking about it. So it's when you speak about something that happened in the past and it's already done and completed, we call those perfect tenses. Correct. Now let us continue to break them up. The tenses, pardon me. We are going to look into our present tense and then now look into present tense when it's indefinite, meaning that it's a simple present tense like we have just discussed. Present tense when it is continuous, when it is perfect, when it is perfect continuous. So let us look into the examples that I've just made here. I walk. Remember, we said with the indefinite action, it means that the verb will not be explicit as to whether the action is still continue, the action is completed or not. It's just to state what is happening currently. Then you know that it's a present, simple present tense or a present indefinite. So it will just be I walk. without indicating whether the process is done or not. And then with the present continuous, we did say that for you to note that the sentence is in a present continuous. Remember, the verb plays an important role with regard to establishing the tense in a sentence. So when the verb ends with ing, it indicates progression or progressive, or continuous. It means that the action is still how? Continuing. And then with perfect, remember with perfect, like I've explained in a previous slide, that it's the use of have, has, and had. So if I presently, I will say I have worked. Don't be confused when you see the word have coupled with a past tense of the word worked, and then we still declare or state that or call it to be a present perfect. Let me just break it down a bit and explain the grammatical rule here. Right, with the present perfect tense, let me reiterate what I explained earlier. With the present perfect tense, it uses auxiliary verb has or have, right? Presently. Remember, presently means in the moment, right now. And the past particle form of the main verb. For example, if you want to use the word go in a present perfect tense, you can't say I have go to town. It doesn't even sound right. There's a major concord error. The sentence doesn't flow. But the word go, it means that you are going to change it to say I have gone. It changes to a past particle, gone to town, but we still declare this to be what? A present perfect a present perfect tense. Now, present perfect continuous, remember the same way with simple present continuous tense, we still have a verb that ends with ing. The difference between this sentence and this sentence is that this one is a simple present tense. I am walking to town, or I am walking to school. But once you include the auxiliary have plus been, now you are changing it into a simple present continuous now to become what? A present perfect continuous. Why? Because of the auxiliary have. Remember, I've said whenever you see the presence of auxiliary has or have, these are used to form what you call perfect tenses. Perfect tenses. Okay, so in a present, remember we are only dealing with the present ones, not the past, not the future, only present. So the present perfect continuous, it will be I have been working. Similarity is that the verb does end with ing. Here it is just say I am to say it is simple progressive tense, but here it says I have been working to show that now we have changed that into a present perfect continuous. So please ensure that you thoroughly understand the rules here. You might actually should expect to get such questions even in examination when you write paper 1, question 5. Examiners may ask you to change a sentence from a simple present tense maybe to a present perfect tense or to a future tense. Now let us look into past tense and then future. Correct. Now let us look into the past perfect. Right, now with the past tenses, we still have the same past indefinite again, past continuous, past perfect, and past continuous. Sorry, past perfect continuous, past perfect, past continuous, past indefinite. Now we are just simply changing the time frame. That action is no longer taking place currently or presently, but it took place way in the past. So here in the present tense, simple present tense, I walk, it changes to become I walked. Then it's a past indefinite, and then I am working presently in the past tense, going to be I was working. Was changes it to be past continuous, and then of course the verb still ends with ing because it's a progressive tense. And then now with the use of tenses, where we have past perfect. Remember, normally here we have the use of the auxiliary have. Now have in the past tense changes to become had, so it's going to be I had walked. Now this is a simple it's a past perfect tense. Past perfect tense because of the auxiliary had walked. I had walked. And then with a past perfect continuous, now we say I. Remember here in a present, in a perfect, pardon me, in a present perfect continuous, it was I have been working. So we change have again to become had in the past tense. So it's going to be I had been working, and of course it ends with ing. Then had been, had is the past of what? Of verb in here. Now let us look into actions that take place in the future. I will walk. It's a future indefinite or future simple tense. I will walk. Future continuous, I will, then you add auxiliary be. I will be walking. And then for future perfect, remember with perfect tenses we use either have or has. I will have walked. So remember the rule that I explained with the past particle, the verb changing to become a past tense always, even though we say it's a future perfect tense. I will have walked. And then future perfect continuous, I will have been, we add the word been again, walking, present continuous tense. So these are the tenses in depth. Besides your simple present tense or indefinite tense, past tense and future tense or continuous. We can also break them down into in-depth analysis of tenses. So in essence, what the aim of the lesson was to show you in depth the types of tenses and how words change to indicate various tenses. But what is important is that a verb, we rely on the nature of the verb to know the type of tense that the sentence is in. So what's important is that when you are asked to change a form of a verb, a form of a tense, to play around with tenses in sentences, you need to look into the verb and know the grammatical rules as to how verbs are affected or how you should write them in various tenses. I hope this will be a fruitful lesson to you, as in when you develop that critical language learning skills. Remember that language cuts across all the components of English, whether it's poetry, whether you are writing, especially in paper 3 when you'll be writing your essays, when you narrate your story or you describe your story, you must be aware of the type of tenses that you are using, depending on the nature of the events, the manner in which the events happened. Do you want to report about something that happened currently, that will happen in the future, or that is already happened and is done and completed? That's where now you can use perfect tenses. So you just need not to write anymore for the sake of writing. You should be cognizant, or you should be mindful of the nature of tenses. Don't forget to share the link and to subscribe, and just stay tuned for more lessons as we work together to understand English better and ultimately perform better in English. Thank you so much.